Okay, so hello everybody. Welcome to the Women in Academics panel. Today we will be interviewing four academics who very exciting to have today. We have Dr. Emily Moylan, who is a lecturer at the School of Civil Engineering, specializing in analytical models for transport and public infrastructure. We have Dr. Jacqueline Thomas, who's a lecturer for civil engineering, specializing in humanitarian and environmental engineering. Professor Gwendolyn Proust, who's a lecturer for materials and contributor to material science and engineering research, and Professor Anya Paradoska, who specializes in advanced structure materials and works as an industrial engagement manager. So can you guys all tell us a little bit about yourselves, your background, and your role at the university? Anyone feel free to jump in.
Okay, I'll start then. I've been there the longest, so I have seniority over everybody. I'm a professor in the School of Civil Engineering, like Tess mentioned. So I actually haven't taught in 2 years, so many of you might not have had me in class. But I started teaching again this year. So I'm teaching first year class since this year, Civil 1110 for materials. That's my background. I did my undergrad study in material science in engineering in France, and then I did my postgrad study still in material science in engineering in the US at Drexel University, where I did my master and PhD, and then I did a postdoc, and then I joined the University of Sydney in 2008. So it's been a few years. And part of my role, so I'm an academic, so I teach, I do research, but I also, I'm the director of a new laboratory, which is a Sydney manufacturing hub. So that takes a lot of my time running the laboratory. So keep me busy on different things. So that's a great place to do research and to try exciting new material development and new technologies.
Thank you so much for that. Does someone else want to give their little bit of background?
Okay, the girls are shy, so I will go. So my name is Ania Paradoska, and I am Polish. I did my undergrad in Poland and did my PhD in mechanical engineering and aerospace at Monash University. I specialize in pressure vessel repair. And so after I finished my PhD, I utilized during my PhD large-scale infrastructure, mostly reactor sources, like you can see in the background, to measure stresses and imperfection in welded connections. So I went to ICES, the good ICES in UK, at Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, worked there for 5 years as an instrument scientist and program engineering advisor. And I come back to ANSTO after that and took a position first as an instrument scientist and then as an industry engagement manager, where I'm sort of building bridges between the academia and industry, utilizing large-scale infrastructure to solve engineering problems, including civil engineering structures. Yeah, so mostly I specialize in connections and advanced manufacturing 3D printing components. And in 2019, I joined Civil Engineering School as a professor of practice. And I came here because I wanted to create the next generation of engineers who know how to use large-scale infrastructure to solve problems. So I hope if you didn't choose a final project yet, here I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Emily, do you want to jump in, give your spiel?
Sure, I'm Emily. I'm a lecturer in transport. I grew up in the United States and did my undergraduate in physics and astronomy, and then I did a PhD in astrophysics at ANU at Mount Stromlo Observatory in Canberra. And then I decided I wanted to do transport. So I went to UC Berkeley and I did a master's of city planning and a master's of science in transport engineering. And then I came to Sydney and I was a postdoc at UNSW. And then I've been at UCID since 2018. And if you've taken any transport electives, you probably had me in class. And because of my background, I'm sort of a data science-y kind of engineer, I guess. So I'm interested in transport informatics, transport analytics, and I'm the one that's trying to get more Python into your curriculum.
Thank you so much. And Jackie, finish us off with the introductions.
Yeah, good. So I did my undergraduate studies at the University of New South Wales. I started off science, arts combo, then went on to do a PhD in environmental engineering. So coming out of my science undergraduate, I was really interested in water quality because I've got a microbiology background. So went into environmental engineering through the Water Research Centre at the University of New South Wales. So really focused on, why is there so much poor water quality around the world and how people get sick from drinking poor water. After I finished my PhD, I was really interested in working overseas. So I went and worked for a non-government organisation NGO, a small NGO, which was basically building water pumps and fixing toilets in rural Tanzania. That led me to work for a not-for-profit research institute in Tanzania, where I started a research group looking at basically how to improve water and toilets, really much linked to the SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals. 2016, University of Sydney was looking to start humanitarian engineering and I got recruited. So I came back from Africa to Sydney and have been at the university since 2016. So my research is pretty much 100% overseas and it's looking at how do we improve water and sanitation. So presently, just as an example, I've got one of my PhD students in Fiji at the moment, actually digging holes around the back of toilets to determine basically the leaching rates of nutrients and pathogens from those latrines because they leach into the river and then people downstream get sick with things like typhoid fever. Yeah, that's me.
Wow, thank you all so much for that. So can you tell us a bit about what sparked your interest in academia and drew you towards this career? Anyone feel free.
Okay. Anna, you wanted to go?
No, you go.
Okay, fine. So, well, when I did my undergrad study, although I did it in France, we had a similar program where in last year I had to do a similar thing as a honors project. And I think that was my first time doing research. So that's something that I found interesting, especially there was an experimental research I was doing. And it was actually an industry related project and it was kind of fun to do. And then when I finished my undergrad studies, I felt like I wanted to have a bit more experience, travel a bit before going to finding a job. So I decided to go to the US and to do a master degree. And the master in the US, there's not really a coursework or research, is that you do both. You do coursework and research. At least in the university I attended. So I had another project there and I really enjoyed it so much that I decided to stay and do a PhD. And from there, it was pretty much said that I wanted to continue in that path. So I don't think it was a dream from when I was a kid. It's more like discovering research by doing an honors project and finding that interesting and then having the opportunity to continue and then really develop a passion for it.
Thank you so much. Sounds good. Anya, did you want to jump? Oh, Jackie, either way.
So I'll just jump into this continuity. I basically got into a PhD because I thought it would be a cheaper version of a master's. So I was a bit naive. I kind of finished my undergraduate and went, look, I really want to specialize in this water quality stuff. I could do a coursework master's and that'd take me 2 years and cost me so much. Or I could do a PhD and get paid. So I was probably a bit naive. I went straight from undergraduate into a PhD, but then really fell in love with just all the time you have to think. It's such a unique situation to sort of say, I've got 3 years of my life that I'm dedicating to solving one problem. It's a tiny problem, but it becomes very big in your own head. And I I could see that research was such a great space to answer really complex questions. And that's what's kept me there. And I've done research type stuff out of university. So when I was working for the water NGO, I was their kind of research person, helping take samples from the field and train people. And then when I was with a not-for-profit research institute, that was a different type of research. Again, it was much more consultancy. So things like working for the World Health Organization and things like that. So my research skills I found have been super useful in other organisations. I've also worked briefly for New South Wales State Government in the water unit, still with those kind of research skills. And I probably look in the future to, you know, I don't think I'll spend forever in a university, we'll see. But, you know, I definitely am aware that that research skills and those abilities to answer complex questions, especially supported by quality data collection and data analysis, is such a valuable skill that it can take you, yeah, lots of different places. That's why I'm in it, basically.
Sounds good.
I have an unusual situation because my mother is a professor of civil engineering, so I probably wound up here because it was modeled from a young age. So I spent all my school holidays drawing on my mom's blackboard in her office and attending lectures in the back of the lecture theater. So I feel like I've been in universities all my life, but probably the trigger moment was I spent the third year of my undergraduate degree in France. And when it was time to think about what to do over the summer, I was in France and I was living in the US, so I couldn't look for a job or anything. So my basically my honors supervisor said, come back and I'll pay you to research over the summer, and then you can stay on and turn that into your honors. So my honors ended up being more substantial, and I got to go to a conference and get published. And so just kind of got me on that trajectory to stay in academia. And then I did my PhD and I was like, I don't want to do astrophysics anymore. So I had another opportunity to leave, and I once again failed to leave academia. And that was because I did an internship as a consultant, and I thought, this isn't for me. And I looked at government and I thought, maybe this isn't for me either. And so I wound up back with what I know.
Okay, so I always like science and maths, and I have lots of energy, so I study double degree, and I always study. And then when I came to Australia, I studied business because it was cheaper than study English, and I work for several companies. Like I couldn't find a full-time job, so I work, you know, for one company. I was redesigning the surfboards, and I was doing architectural glazing, and I realized that every 6 months I'm bored, you know. So until I know everything in the company, the learning process I enjoy, and I love the challenge, but I just felt that after 6 months I need to find a new job. So in a period of 2 years, I worked for 6 companies, yeah. And then I finally get my PR, and I was thinking the company I work last will employ me, and they told me, Anya, we're too small for you. You need to go. And I couldn't believe it. You helped me get my permanent residency, and I can't stay. And but he told me that the company I work for in Perth told me that they have an office in Melbourne, and if I want to go, they can work there. And I was saying, no, I'm gonna find my job myself. And I find a job I was looking for a job as a lab assistant, and I came accidentally to the job interview for a PhD. And I think at the time it was a critical concept for them, because you know, like they if they will not give me that PhD, they will probably lose the money. so accidentally I become a PhD student, but 6 months into it, I really like it. I finally felt like I fit in. Like I have this beautiful brain around me, and I knew that I'm not gonna be bored for the next 3 years. And as the ladies said before, the fact that you could travel, I was always motivated by the conferences and large-scale facility are in beautiful places that I can travel for free, do some science, meet some really interesting people, and I think, yeah, I think career in science is very challenging, but also very interesting. Thank you.
Can you guys tell us a bit more about the challenging and rewarding aspects of the academic career, particularly as we were speaking about before, having 4 women in the civil engineering industry is quite, you know, a big feat for us to have you all together. So of course it's a very male dominated industry. Do any of you want to speak to that, or the challenges and rewards?
Okay, I started this time. So I think, I'm Polish. So in Poland, during the communists, they put women on the tractors and on the rockets. They were trying to see that women can do everything. And I grew up this way. Yeah, so I never really thought I cannot do engineering. Having 2 brothers and my dad have a mechanical workshop, I thought I'm also 6 foot tall, so I look like a man. And I can do what men can do. But when I came to Australia, it actually surprised me, that how and in Europe you have more females in STEM than you have it in Australia. But I have to also say that the opportunities were everywhere. As I start as the female in Monash University, I was the only female in welding. I was the first female at ANSTO doing engineering facility. I was the first engineer employed at Rutherford Appleton Laboratory, first engineer at ANSTO. It's like always I'm the first woman, but it's like I somehow don't see that I don't fit in. Like maybe that's a good thing, that I did not get the job because I wanted to be a first woman. I just thought I'm the right person for the job. And I think sometimes it's rather hard to realize, that to be where we are, we bringing the diversity and slightly different perspective. And I think I make every team I work with taught me lots of things, not only about myself, but how I can influence the team that I work with. And I think being 20 years in engineering, I rarely see another 4 amazing females in the room. I have to say that, as much this is challenging, is a mission now. Like we wanted to make sure that more female like us join us, become heard, and don't think that there is a glass ceiling, because we here and we are academics, and we obviously somehow break some glass ceiling on the way to be where we are, and it's worth it, because when I go to the class and I see students, female students, and excited about the engineering career, I think it's great. It's an engineering career without of borders. Nowadays, you don't have to dig the trenches or go in mining. You can do computer science and data science from beautiful office, or so it's the creativity that engineering requires, and I think females have lots of it. So I can talk about the subject for a long time, but I want to give my colleagues a chance. Thank you.
All right, I'll jump in. So I think there's 2 parts to this for me. One of which is, I think we all have an innate personality or an innate sort of component that we're interested in. Like STEM comes naturally to some people, it doesn't come naturally to others. And there is a gender divide along that. That's why the veterinary school is full of women and the nursing school are full of women. There are natural kind of orientations that people have. And I think when you do have an orientation, like Anastasia said, maybe towards what is considered to be a more male-dominated environment, you do come up against barriers that kind of are telling you, oh, is this the right place for you? You don't fit in. For example, one of my preferences for undergraduate university was engineering. And my mother, in all her wisdom, was like, oh, is engineering really for you? And she steered me towards science, and that's where I went. And obviously I've taken my time and I'm now come back. But I think you have to be true to your own interests and follow your own interests. And like Anna said, if you're following your own interests and you're aligning with what you're doing with where you have skills and ability, then you're not going to notice your point of difference in the room. And that's the best place to be. You just do your work, you do it as best as you can, and you ignore the fact that you have clickety heels as you walk down the hallway and everyone knows you're coming. The other component that I really find sort of in this space, and especially as you start to realize as you walk in as one of the only females in a large meeting, your point of view is very valuable. You know, as engineers, we're engineering for a population which is half female. So, and especially from my perspective with water and sanitation, where there is often a gendered element. Men use toilets differently to women. Women have different needs when they use toilets because of menstrual, you know, hygiene requirements and things like that. And as a woman, I can speak to that authentically and, you know, realistically. And I can sit in an interview when we're doing female-only focused group discussions about difficult things like menstrual hygiene, and that's okay. So I almost see that I can bring something to the table that my male colleagues can't. So yeah, I sort of see it in some respects as a point of strength, but you know, you need to be true to your own interests and just be conscious of those, you know, sometimes even not so visible signs of people trying to tell you you don't fit in, and is this the right path for you? It's got to, yeah, just have a little bit of conviction in your own direction, I think would be my guidance.
Okay, I can go. So I'm a bit like Anna, like at the start, it was like no question, like being a female will stop me to do anything. And in my family, that was not even like a question like of, is engineering okay for you? It's just like, we were treated like, my parents had 2 boys, 2 girls, and we were treated exactly the same way with the same task to do at home. There was no like, this is for girls and this is for guys, like everybody had to do the same things. And so they never like question like, should you do engineering or not? I was good in math and not that good in physics in high school, but I was good in math. And so there was like really no questions. And I think because I did material science and engineering, where I think there was more female anyway, even in other universities all over the world, but in France for sure, like we were 40%, I guess, women. The difference between female and male and being in a really male dominated didn't really happen to me until I came to Australia. When I started civil engineering, I was the first female academic hired. There was nobody before me. There had never been any full-time continuing position. They had casual people doing lecturing, but they had never hired a female academic in civil engineering at the University of Sydney before 2008. We were actually 3 hired the same year, 3 female and 3 women, and then actually 2 left, and for many years I was the only one. And I guess like most of my, it's not really been an issue, like most of the colleagues, you know, my colleagues, we were from the same background or same age range, so there was never been like really a big difference. There were not really like some older people that will have seen things differently, so they were used. But I think sometimes it felt lonely to be the only woman in a meeting, and to have like all the staff meeting and be the only woman all the time. And I remember one time where I really got me really pissed off is that they wanted to open a new degree, and they say, oh, this is great, this is going to like attract a lot of female students, and they all turned towards me to see what did I think. I'm like, what? Like, I know what all the women want to do, like, because I'm the only woman in the room, I can tell you, oh yeah, this is great, like this is really going to attract all the female students. I really felt like really like for once they put me like as a different person than one of their colleagues. I was a woman in the room, and I'm like, didn't like that at all. So I was quite happy when more academic female were hired, because the first one to come was Jackie. So it was good to have another person. The other problem is that I had is that because of the university rules, like they had to be a female academic in every committee. So that means that I was part of every single committee that existed in the School of Civil Engineering. So I had way more work than everybody else. And I keep complaining about, do you think it's a fair system? Oh yeah, but we have to have female in everything. Yeah, but there's only one. So that means I have to be part of everything. So when Jackie arrived, I was glad because I'm like, no, I'll ask Jackie now. Sorry, Jackie. But I was just like, I did my time. So yeah, so this is something like, that depends what the rules are. And I think we're trying to say, yeah, it's good to have you have to be realistic on what the expectation that people put on you, because you are the only female person at work. And you have to, like, at some point say, yeah, that's not working. You either have to change the rule or hire more people, because this is not the way things should be done. So there had been some challenges, but overall, I have to say, like, this has been good in a way, because I was part of all the committees, so I can tell you I knew everything that was going on. So I think that's also a good career move. I networked way more than my male colleagues who were at the same level, because I started meeting way more people. So in a way that served me, but it's also meant that I had more work. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so that was now I think it's a bit easier. And having more colleague women is a great thing. I'm really happy.
I'll just jump in and say that I think it's maybe too simplistic to just talk about gender diversity. It's a lot more complex than that. So I don't think most people in the world would look at this panel and say it's a particularly diverse panel, even though we're sort of somehow representing diversity. So yeah, I think engineering has a long way to go with that. The other aspect of that was important for me is that, like Gwinnell and Anya said, like, I grew up being told, like, my mom was a professor of civil engineering. I went to an all-girls school, and I was encouraged to do science and math from the start. And it really didn't occur to me that this would be challenging until later. And it's snuck up on me slowly. And the big step change for me was becoming a parent. And then a lot of gendered challenges came into play surrounding that, things that I wasn't aware of before. And I think I'd been raised with a little bit of naivete, like, oh yeah, there was, some problems with gender diversity in engineering in the past, but like, by the time you get to your career, don't worry about it, it's going to be fine. And when the rubber hits the road, it's a little bit more challenging. And it's a lot of the grown-up stuff that is probably not that easy to wrap your head around when you're doing your undergraduate degree. But things like just being an adult and owning a home and having a partner or having children, there's a lot that goes into that about society's expectations about primary earners and primary carers, and how you spend your time, and it sneaks in all kinds of weird ways. And I think it would just be really hard to imagine that. Certainly my 20 or 22-year-old self could not have imagined what it was like to have to adult in this situation.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for those answers. Now we have time for the individual questions, which you'll get a bit more time to talk about your own specialties. I might begin with Anya. So, given your extensive experience across different sides of the STEM industries with involvement in advisory committees, research councils, and universities, how valuable do you see collaboration between these different bodies and students and businesses to be? And how do you think that all of that will change the STEM industry?
That's a very good question, very long question. I hope I answered all the things. I just wanted to say that it's so important, was always important for me to look for mentors. Yeah, so I joined committees to actually have a mentorship, to actually find people who I wanted to mimic for a start, so work with in the future and things like that. So I think, and I also recommend it to my students, like, don't just become a member of Engineers Australia, become a member of a committee and work on it. You can't have a leadership position in your first job, Go and join the community that will give you potential to grow your leadership. That's how I done it, and I think it's so important that you take the opportunity to in your early career to have opportunity to join committees and have a mentorship from different organizations, different companies, different facilities. Engineering still is a relationship building profession, you know, especially if when you're young. Because you know, even if you're extremely good scientist or engineer, and you cannot communicate it with your colleagues or with your clients, it's hard. It's going to be harder for you, because it's you know, people who you meet in those committees will track your career. They will help you in the future, and I think I would recommend it to young engineers to really look for opportunity to growth outside of the normal spectrum of activities. Yeah, and I think I have this problem, like what Gwynel was saying, that I'm always the only female on every committee I'm joining, and I'm really always pushing the other one to come along. Yeah. And I think at the before I have a children, that was much more easier because I have more time. And since I have a children, it's really difficult for me because I cannot travel as much. But I then discover social media. Yeah, and for me, that is something that I can do with the coffee after the kids go to sleep. And I can then join, network, promote my team, promote the science I do. So I think it's so important that you take in your career along your way the opportunities that comes to you. You have to say lots of yeses before you become mature enough to say strategic no. Yeah. So I think for me it's important that you know, you grow. And nowadays, when I'm a little bit more established and I have children, my priorities change, and I only do things that are aligned with my current lifestyle. But I think at the beginning I was really trying to just learn as much as possible and as quick as possible, and whoever was able to teach me, I would just follow. And through these opportunities, different international advisory board, and I learned faster. I met my future employees, and I think I will say that probably, I mean, they always say that you should work more on yourself than on your work to actually have your next career step. You know, I did not understand that for a very long time, but it usually in every job I do, it takes me 6 months to a year to become comfortable. Yeah, but it takes me 3 years to work outside network. Yeah, so you know, how I can enhance my influence network. Yeah, and I think this is so important, that give yourself strategic time to what you wanted to do. First, become comfortable in your own job, and then spread your wings and look for other things, opportunities to grow. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Very insightful, I think, for all of the people here who obviously undergraduate students still have a bit of time on our hands, so should definitely get on to all of that. So Jackie, we'd love to hear about how your research collaborations with partners in Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific have all impacted your understanding of humanitarian engineering itself, as well as the importance of providing education on this specialized area to those who want to work in remote or developing countries, because as you mentioned, it is a relatively new major for, at least for the University of Sydney. And yeah, what's your stance on all of that?
I think I'd like to turn the question around, and it's about how do I, as an academic with a skill set, help people in contexts that have these water and sanitation challenges, help them find solutions that are going to work for them. So, I mean, every culture and every context is different. So I think every single project that we engage in and every single location we go to, and it can be even as nuanced as one village 10 kilometers up the road and the next village 10 kilometers down the road, have different needs and have different challenges and have different requirements. And I think that's one of the most interesting things in humanitarian engineering, is how do you communicate and understand what those challenges are, and also be very conscious of what you're bringing to the table. So, you know, how we do things in Australia is one way. Is that the right way for lots of places around the world? Absolutely not. Do I have my own biases and perspective that I bring to every single conversation? Yes, and I need to be very conscious of that. And so I've actually found that having myself in a meeting as a, you know, obviously white female, is sometimes not helpful, because I change the dynamic of the conversation. There's, you know, different expectations of what, say, a university with a profile at University of Sydney can bring. So for example, in a particular meeting, they might be like, well, you're from the University of Sydney, you've got lots of money, you can just come and give us all new toilets. And I'm like, no, that's not a good approach for any of us, because, you know, if we don't have the maintenance and they're not the right toilets, then you're just going to be in the same terrible spot again in 10 years. So I've actually discovered that I'm better off to sit more in the background, and then I work with local partners. So for example, the Fiji project we have at the moment, we employ a team of 10 people through Fiji National University, and they are the voice of the project. They are, I mean, it makes sense, they're Fijian, they speak local language, they understand all the culture and context and all those complicated things that I couldn't learn in a lifetime. And they're the ones who are, you know, leading these discussions with communities about what's appropriate sanitation. And then I see myself more as, you know, I guess, capacity building that Fiji National University team. So when they come back and go, you know, we're stuck on something technically, like we don't quite know what the right sanitation system is to build, or, you know, which standards should we use, or, you know, how far away from the river should it be? And that's when I can use sort of my more research knowledge and go, okay, right, based on our understandings of the hydrogeology and the likely pathogen routes and these are your options. But then I let them take that back to the community. So it's, and I really liked Anya's point about it's all about relationships and understanding people's perspectives. And I think humanitarian engineering just has that added layer of, now we've got a cross-cultural scenario. And we also have, we're working across cultures and also, you know, across understandings. You know, people have very different perspectives on, for example, how people get sick. So in a lot of cultures I work with, especially in Africa, the concept of how people get sick is different. You know, it can be linked to behavior. You know, you've done the wrong thing and now you get sick. And as much as, I mean, I had scientists in my team and we'd sit there and have these debates, and I'm like, you don't, like, because they could quite comfortably have these two different belief systems sitting side by side. So obviously they'd done science degrees and they understood how pathogens were transported through water to get sick, but then they also believed in what we call African black magic, that if you did the wrong thing and someone cursed you, you could also get sick. But what's the mechanism for that? And they're like, oh, no, it just happens. So just to have those two very different belief systems sitting quite comfortably with each other. And then that also informs how they, you know, make decisions around community things. So that's, yeah, that's sort of the long way around. But I think humanitarian engineering is this amazing intersection of, yes, there's the engineering component and the technology, or, you know, whatever, maybe trying to improve water quality, but then there's this really complex anthropological layer of how people interact and cultures, and that part I find really interesting. And we haven't even got into kind of politics and money and all that side of it, but yeah, it's complex problem solving, which I really like. And you get it wrong. Like, I learn something every single time I go to a community. So just recently, well, not recently, it was a couple of years ago before COVID, obviously when I go to the field, I'm a bit fair, I get sunburned. So I wear a hat. So I'm just wearing a cap. And then the team were very worried about me in this hat. They're like, "Oh, where are you going? Don't walk into someone's house with the hat on." I'm like, no, take the hat off before I go into someone's house. And then later on, they're looking a bit, concerned. And I'm like, "Is there something wrong with the hat?" And they're like, "Yes, wearing a cap is terrible in the community. Like, it means that you're being disrespectful to the elders." And I'm like, okay, we can ditch the hat. I'll just put more sunscreen on. But, even such a simple thing like that I wouldn't even think that it would be a problem. But apparently wearing a cap is disrespectful in a Fijian village. Things you learn, but things that come up all the time, constantly. So your question was about how has it changed my view or that perspective of humanitarian engineering. I'm constantly learning from the communities that we work with and constantly trying to adapt and find solutions that fit those contexts. So yeah, that's the interesting part, I find.
Yeah, I definitely think the cultural sensitivity side of humanitarian engineering is something we overlook a lot, and definitely, particularly in a university setting, focus a bit more on the technical side, which isn't always the most helpful in every situation. So it's definitely a good perspective to hear. So we might move over to Professor Proust now. You've studied and researched in many countries, obviously in Australia, and you mentioned France and America. How has this diverse experience and diversity of environment impacted your capacity for innovative research and your access to resources and the different work that you're able to do?
So I didn't actually do research in France. Like, I did my undergrad study in France and then I moved away to the US. So my experience in working in France is actually really recent, when I started collaboration with a university in France. But first, like, from a personal point of view, I've lived on 3 different continents. And so that part is quite exciting. Like, it helped me really meet a lot of different people with different backgrounds, and people I would not have had the chance to know if I had stayed in France and go work in industry, because there was not that many international students in my undergrad studies in France. So we were not really exposed to different culture, which I think you guys have the chance to have, and you should take advantage of, to meet people from different backgrounds, different countries, and learn from them, because that's was the most part of my postgrad studies, meeting people from all over the world. I was quite excited to get in a school where there were people from Asia, US, Europe, Africa, South America, and to learn from them about how they do things at home, or share the food. We had potluck quite often, and learn about the culture. And so now I have friends pretty much in every country in the world. I exaggerate, but not that much. So that was one thing that doing postgrad studies has helped me to get. And then been working in different part of the world, it's building my network, knowing who's doing what in different countries. I sometimes find really limited, because I'm I know people in the US. I know actually a couple of people in Europe, because I'm not that strong with my European connection. I know people in Australia, but I have no connection in Asia. I have no connection in South America. And I think that's something that's missing, and I'm looking forward to build, because there is talent everywhere in the world, and having access to them through your network. And that's what Anya was mentioning, building your network, making yourself known. And she's fantastic at doing this, building social network. I hate it. But I'm starting to do it. She's always trying to convince me, open a Twitter account. I'm what will I say on a Twitter account? So I'm doing LinkedIn, which is already my concession. And I put a few posts a year. So I'm not that active, but I'm building my network. I see what people are doing. And when I have some exciting news or events that I'm sponsoring, I'm organizing, I put that there to put the word out. And like that, like people in my network and people in the network of the people in my network know about it. And it's a great way to then advertise things that happening, like conferences, like exhibit, industry exhibits, exposition, and or new papers that you publish with great results. And so this is like something I think is useful to do. That's the way you build your network when you cannot travel, especially in the last 2 years where we haven't been able to go anywhere. So no conferences, like I did a couple of conferences like online, but this is actually not great. It's like, because a whole part of the conference is, of course, attending the talks, but there is all the networking that you do, and you cannot do that on a Zoom like talk. It's not happening. So now I'm quite excited that I had my first conference, like also it was local in June. It was in Melbourne. I have one next week in Japan, so I'm going there. I know Anya is coming back from South America, so I think I was pretty excited to have an international conference, like after 2 years of being stuck in Australia. And so, like, I think like it's my experience in being able to work in different countries just opened me to be, helped me to be open to like different people and to meet people from all over the world and then keep those connections. Something that you have to say, like I still talk to some people from my undergrad studies, but well, I haven't lived in France in so long that it's difficult. But the people like I've done my PhD with, they still do research for most of them. And so we try to collaborate, and that's a good way to like try to keep connection with your friends, to actually do some work together and actually get more connection with the people I did with my postgrad study than people I did my undergrad, because they don't do research, they engineer, they work in industry, and there's not really much connection work-wise that we can have.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think traveling and all of that sounds like one of the most exciting parts of the academic career. So I'm glad that that's all starting up again and the conferences are happening.
Yep, we are too.
So finally, we've got Emily. You mentioned having a fairly significant career change from astrophysics to transport analysis. I know many students here today are kind of a bit unsure about their future careers and, you know, using their studies to develop their problem solving and analytical skills as opposed to the technical knowledge if they're not too sure what exactly they would like to do. So I'd love to hear about how your background has contributed to your approaches and knowledge of your now area.
Okay, yep. So I did physics and astronomy and then astrophysics through my PhD, and then I decided I wanted to do something that was more applied. And this, I think I was responding to the fact that sometimes research can feel like it's self-serving, particularly science, something like astrophysics. You're like not really trying to help people's day-to-day lives, like this is for the knowledge of all mankind. And so if you have a bad day in that, you just sort of think, well, that was a waste of a day. I didn't do anything. I didn't help anybody, and nobody's life is better because I better understand the distribution of dark matter in galaxies. So I was reacting to that, and I wanted something more applied. And so I switched directions. And I think that probably looking back on that change years later, I've realized that no matter how applied your research is, you still kind of have tastes like that. And so I guess my advice would be, you shouldn't assume that your career is going to be one thing from when you graduate until you retire. Like most people have changes of direction, and they can be nuanced, or they can from the outside, they can feel like it was a natural progression, but people make these decisions to take on the role of a directorship or to do a professor of practice or to shift to more field work. Like, this happens to everybody's career. I would say that one of the experiences that I had, so I did the PhD and I sort of gained this expertise and this skill set, and then I went to Berkeley and I was doing coursework and learning transport, and all of my fellow students had done their engineering degrees, and there was stuff that they'd learned already that I had not learned yet. And so there's a lot of humility in starting over. You have to go back to being bad at it, but it does pass, that feeling. And it's okay to feel like that. But you also, like, sometimes it's worth sticking with something because there's a certain victory associated with just sticking with something long enough that you are quite good at it after a while. So at the same time that I went back and started studying engineering, I was also playing hockey. So I play hockey, and I have played since I was a little kid. And I just had this sort of moment of like, oh, this is what it's like to do something where I know what I'm doing. Like, I know the rules and I know how to play this and I have skills and I'm still using them. And so that was like an important contrast for me to be like, oh, like, I don't solve problems the way that people who did their undergraduates in engineering or in planning do. I solve them the way I was trained to do in physics, much more like deriving from first principles, more data science. And so like I spent a lot of time feeling like I was not fitting in or not doing the same thing. And then to be able to be like, oh, it's not just that I'm like this in every aspect of my life. Like, if I stick with this for 10 or 15 years, I'm going to feel the way I do on my hockey field. Like, oh, I know how to do this. Yeah. So I'd say don't change your whole life at once. Maybe hold on to a few things that are familiar, so you get that feeling of success and familiarity. And yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's definitely, I'm sure, useful to a lot of people here today. So we have been getting a few questions in on the Slido. One that has popped up a few times is essentially about how can the engineering research industry continue to change to promote the presence of women, if any of you want to take that question.
I'll tackle that. So I think that the thing that needs to change, the most important thing that needs to change, has very little to do with the women coming through. I think that the main thing that needs to change is that there needs to be recognition from people who have power to make decisions that gender diversity or any kind of diversity is something that's important to them. So I guess this is the message for all of you who may or may not identify as being in a position of advantage or privilege in civil engineering, that like it's on you. That's your job. And I think, everybody to some extent comes with some element of privilege, like the fact that you guys are going to be going out into the world with a degree from a very good university. You have just become a powerful person in the field, and all of you need to advocate that there are things that are important to do, that are more important than bottom lines or whatever KPIs. Yeah, but that has to happen from the group that has the most power, however that might be defined.
That's a great way of explaining that. But I also think that sometimes we need a generation to pass. Like we have a different problems when we were starting. You're gonna have a slightly different approach. Like I have 2 daughters, yeah, and I'm trying to teach them, how the life looks like, and I don't want them to think that it's divided to 50-50 or 30-70 or whatever the current target's gonna be. I think we need to be aware of our own bias and of our own advantages as well. So, you know, there is so much in learning from each other and from different perspectives and from the diversity that we cannot risk it to lose it. You know, like I think as if you become a leaders of the future, you need to be aware of the fact that you know, we all came here to this world through the woman, you know, and I think, you know, those women that raise you and help you to get your career, and they are you staying on the shoulders of giants, you know. Like I think my mom doesn't have a degree, you know, and but she was the best engineers I ever knew. You know, she could engineer the toys that we couldn't have, and I really think you have to have the role models, but you also have to have desire to change and desire to follow through, even if it is not easy, you know. And I think I feel it a little bit like, you know, in Australia, that everybody says the right thing, but are you actually feel it? You know, are you actually do something about it? You know, I think it's you know, it's diplomatic to say, yeah, we need to have a targets, we want more women, you know, but what we actually really doing behind the closed doors, that's what's matter. And I think you know, the future is in your hands, so I'm looking forward to the bright future.
Just like to sorry, just to add, sorry, Tess, Jacqueline mentioned that a mom told her like, oh, is it going to be too difficult? And I actually heard that story from other person who are professors now as well, and make their way through the system. And I hope that the new generation of parents will understand that there's no limit about what women can do. And maybe there is like an education to be made here as well to make sure that women are not discouraged to do things that they feel like doing because people think, oh, it's going to be too difficult. So I think there is some work to be done, but that was like nothing to do with industry. That's a work that needs to be done to kids in the younger age, and to educate at the same time parents to see like there's no reason why a woman cannot do that, like, and make sure that this message is passed along, and that generation by generation less of that could be happening.
And one thing I just want to reflect on is I don't necessarily think that affirmative action and making sure we've got 50-50 men and women and everything, I don't think that's the right path either. As I said, we don't go to the vet school and say, oh dear, you know, I've got 90% female enrollments, we better fix that. That doesn't happen, you know, like, so I think we need to be comfortable with, in some sectors, yeah, there will be different representation, but I guess, you know, we need to make sure that for those that would like a career in, you know, the engineering space, that there is no obvious barriers. But I've also found that affirmative action, i.e. ensuring that a particular hire is a female hire, or potentially preferencing women for some scholarships, can also be problematic. I've been told a number of times, you only got your job because you're a woman. And that's, what does that make me think? Like, am I not good enough? And then I constantly sit there and try and compare myself with my male colleagues and go, well, I'm only here because I'm female, so I must be deficient. And then that creates doubt. And then you kind of lose your self-confidence. And to be an academic, you need a bit of mojo. You need to kind of be pushing. You need to be throwing in publications in places where you think you might get rejected. You need to be pitching grants at, you know, high-level, you know, donors that you think, oh, I'm in with a chance. And this narrative of you're only here because you're female, I think is really counterproductive, and I would like to never hear it again. So I would like, and I understand, you know, we'd like to encourage, but I think the best way to do that, which we're doing already, like our PhD student proportion of female PhD students is higher than our undergrads. That was, what, a couple of years ago, I haven't kept up with statistics, but I think we have the pipeline there. But yeah, I really caution against really strong affirmative action targets where we're like, right, we must recruit 50% women, because if people are not suited to the job, if they don't have the right skill set, they're not going to succeed, and then they're going to, you know, that's a negative too, if people sort of come and leave quickly. And then it also feels this narrative that you often hear, which is, oh, but women aren't so good at that, you know, oh, but the babies came and they left, oh, but, you know, so we really got to be careful about what activities happen, and the university's not great with it, like Gwinnell sort of spoke to. You know, is it particularly fair to be loading up women with all these extra commitments? You know, like, so funny, every time they talk about we've got a female advancement program, it's at cost to my time. It's like, we want to help you get ahead by coming and joining us for 1 day a month in a workshop. I'm like, is that really going to help me? Or is that going to help you make it look like we're reaching our female KPIs? So I think, well, some of the questions in the chat about, there's a really good one here about what can male colleagues do in academia, or things that men in academia can do to be aware and order of those things, not overburden your minorities. And we're talking here about gender minority, but there's lots of other minorities, you know, English as a second language minorities, people who have come, you know, new arrivals in Australia, those things. Like, don't overburden minorities with some KPIs that you have to reach some university strategy. Like, you have to be very conscious of, yeah, what you're doing, because those minorities probably already are overburdened with whether it be childcare responsibilities or, you know, just dealing with working cross-culturally or all those other things. My 2 cents.
Yeah, that's definitely all very fair. I know there's always a lot of discourse around, you know, oh, like women are going to get all the internships because they just want to hire the women and all of that kind of stuff, which is definitely very counterproductive for all people, really. So yeah, I think we're running out of time a bit, so we might wrap it up now. But thank you so much for coming today to share all of that with us. It's definitely been very insightful and very good to hear for me as an undergraduate student and all of the people who have attended today. And thank you also to everyone who's come along to listen. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.